Hello, it's your Associate Pastor, Father Michael Lampe, coming to you with another video reflection. In my last video reflection, I talked about checking in kind of like with ourselves, just seeing where we are, getting an honest understanding of ourselves, what's going on inside our minds and inside our hearts. How are we doing in the midst of these difficulties and challenges? Today, I would like to focus just a little bit more on a similar topic, but aim it specifically at the spiritual level. So last time it was kind of in general, but this time I'd like to be more specific to the spiritual life. In our relationship with God, in these difficulties, in these challenges, how are we doing? What's going on? And it's important for us to be honest with ourselves. If God seems distant, if there's difficulties in our understanding of how God can let certain things happen, we need to be honest with ourselves. How are we doing? What's going on in our prayer lives? What's going on in our spiritual lives? For some people, this may seem a lot like that time when the disciples were on the boat with Jesus and a storm comes, but Jesus is asleep, and the disciples, they all start to panic, and then they wake Jesus up and they're all terrified and concerned. And Jesus quiets the storm, and he reminds the disciples that they should be having faith. And I think the same thing is important for all of us. One of the interesting things that I've noticed just in my interactions with other people is that those who have a prayer life, those who have confidence in God, those who are more certain, more solid, more in depth in their faith, they seem to be weathering this storm of national emergency a bit better than those who aren't quite as deep, who aren't quite as far, who aren't quite as strong in their faith. And to me, that shows the power that our faith has. That those of us who truly believe, those of us who hope in the Lord, those of us who love the Lord in a strong way, have this great confidence in the Lord, that even in the midst of these difficulties, these challenges, these struggles, that he will bring good out of it, that evil will not prevail. And now, if you're one of those who are more like the disciples who panic, does that mean that what does that mean, you might be thinking? Well, it means that there's an opportunity for further growth. It means that during this time of difficulty and challenge, where perhaps you have a little bit more time on your hands, to dive in a little bit deeper in the faith, to continue on that journey towards the Lord, wherever we are in our spiritual lives, wherever we happen to be, the Lord is calling us to draw closer to him. And as long as we keep drawing closer to him, then wherever we happen to be, whether we're doing well and we're confident in the Lord or we're struggling right now, wherever we happen to be, that's okay. But we need to recognize where we are and then draw closer to the Lord. Allow ourselves to be drawn closer to the Lord by going deeper in prayer, by asking the Lord whatever questions happen to be on our hearts. One of the great things about prayer is that we can pray informally. That is, we don't have to follow a set of words. We can just pray from our hearts. And whatever happens to be on our hearts, on our minds at the moment, when we come to the Lord in prayer, to share that with him. And just lay it out there, whatever it happens to be. If God seems distant and it doesn't make sense to you, tell him that. Tell him that it doesn't make sense or that it seems like he's far. Why is that? Share with him these things, but then also give him the opportunity to respond. Be willing to sit in silence and be open to see if he says anything in return. Maybe he'll inspire a thought. Maybe he'll inspire an image. Maybe he'll trigger a memory. Maybe he will speak to you through another person later in the day. There are many ways that God can respond to our prayers. But we need to be open to that and listening for the Lord and allowing him the opportunity to speak to us. It's important for us during these times of difficulties and challenge to be willing to look to the Lord, to have faith, to hope in his promises, to love the Lord, and wherever we are on our spiritual journey, to take the effort and the time to go a little deeper, to go a little farther, to draw a little closer to our Lord, to come up with a way of how we can do that. How do we enter more deeply into prayer? Maybe it's informal prayer, like I mentioned. Maybe it's spiritual reading. One of the things that I love to do when my prayer life is kind of low is read something written by the saints. There are a lot of good books out there, or read a biography about a saint. Learning more about them, reading their diaries, bibliographies, seeing how they had a great relationship with the Lord despite their difficulties, their challenges, can inspire us to have greater faith as well. And so it's important for all of us to draw closer to the Lord regardless of where we are in our spiritual lives, but it's also good for us to recognize what's going on inside of us. Where are we spiritually? How is our relationship with the Lord going? So I invite you to reflect upon that, to take a moment to pause, to think about it, to recognize what's going on within you, how your relationship with the Lord currently is, what your thoughts and feelings are about that, and then after you're able to name it, to recognize that you have the ability to choose what the next steps are. And I invite you to draw closer to the Lord with that and allow those difficulties, those challenges, whatever it is, to be tamed, to be overcome, to be settled, much like the storm that Jesus quiets down and alleviates the panic of the disciples while they were on the Sea of Galilee. So let us allow him to do the same for us. Thank you, and God bless.